Hello, welcome to Shaking and Sipping. This is the show where we shake up and then sip a variety of cocktails and other mixed drinks while looking a bit at their history or some variations thereon. This week we are continuing to work through the IBA's list of official classic cocktails to see how they stack up. We're still in part one, the Unforgettables, and this week's Unforgettable is the Clover Club. Now, whilst I wouldn't say this drink has been forgotten per se, its exact method of creation has somewhat, as we will see from the variety of opinions around the internet and in various books about how it's made. There's not a lot of question about where it's from, although the IBA continues to not give any history at this point in the list. Now, the Clover Club was the name of a social club in Philadelphia, which there's some dispute about its founding as well. Certainly 19th century, possibly as early as the early 1880s, possibly more like 1896, depends on who you ask. And then they moved to a permanent location in a hotel bar in 1904 in Philadelphia. So we know all that. We know that the drink originated there. We don't know exactly when. There's a reference to it from 1901, though it doesn't give a recipe, so it's not 100% clear that that's the same drink. It's definitely around by 1909, somewhere in that range, and created at the Clover Club. Now, I will give you, just as a fun historical note, the official toast of the Clover Club. Here's to a long life and a merry one, a quick death and a happy one, a good girl and a pretty one, a cold bottle and another one. Say, why did time his glass sublime fill up with sand unsightly, when wine he knew runs brisker through and sparkles far more brightly? So that's our official Clover Club toast. Now onto the drink itself. What the heck is it? Well, it's definitely gin. And I'm now out of the list of things that it definitely is. Now, what we see from the earliest notes of it is that it is definitely gin. It's definitely raspberry syrup, which once I finish introducing ingredients, I'll cut to a video of my making that. The earliest versions include dry vermouth and maybe lemon. Now, the IBA specified version does not have the vermouth. Does have the lemon. There's lots of other versions out there. There's a very common variant. Looks like it started a little bit later, but has been cited in this century by such luminaries as Paul Clark in his version of the drink, which is based on a 1951 book that I'm not super familiar with, but that uses grenadine in place of the raspberry syrup. That seems like a totally different drink, and I don't have any homemade grenadine on hand at the moment, and I'm not going to go get a bottle of roses because that doesn't taste of anything. So we're going to stick with all raspberry syrup variants of it. There are also variants like one of Difford's Guide. They have multiple variants of this one, but they have a variant that just uses fresh raspberries that you shake to sort of syrupify right there in the shaker. I'm going to stick with the syrup. That is the historical way of doing it. They also use actually multiple types of vermouth in theirs. They have both Noilly Prat and some kind of a Rosso vermouth, which again seems much later. I'm not sure if that's just to make up for some of the sweetness from the raspberry syrup or what that is exactly. But without further ado, I'm going to cut away, show you how to make some raspberry syrup very simply, very quickly, and then when we come back, we'll make the IBA version and then a few other twists. Hey there, Editing Room Steven with you here once again. Unfortunately, you are not going to see that promised clip of making raspberry syrup. Mea culpa. I was cleaning up my memory cards, and that one wasn't associated with a date where I filmed a video, so it didn't get tagged with anything, and got deleted. So, really short version, make a 2-to-1 simple syrup, so 2 parts sugar, 1 part water, throw them in a pan, cook them over fairly low heat and stir till everything's incorporated. Once you have a simple syrup, you want 1 of the small typical containers of raspberries. I believe they're typically about 6 ounces. You throw that in, you give that a stir, help break it down a little bit, and then once that's fully broken down, go ahead and strain that into a bottle. Kind of use the back of your spoon on the strainer to push through all the goodness while keeping any seeds and undissolved flesh away in your strainer. and then you're good to go. It's a 2-to-1, so it should be shelf stable at that point. I typically still keep mine refrigerated, but 2-to-1 or higher sugar ratio in general, you can keep shelf stable. I do for my standard simple, or for like an oleosaccharum or something. So that is the short version. Sorry there's no video. Bye. Right, now on to making the drink. All of these call for egg white, or you could use aquafaba or cocktail foamer or something else. We're gonna stick with egg white, and I'm gonna prep that first. I'm gonna do my darndest here to actually split the egg white between 2 glasses, because you really don't need a whole one. We'll see how that goes. This is a little bit fiddly sometimes, so it is what it is. I'm gonna rinse myself off. Right, now we have our egg white. Let's go ahead and add our other handful of ingredients. So, of the raspberry syrup, we're gonna need 15 milliliters, or half an ounce. Spill some immediately. Then of the gin, and I'm using Bombay here, which actually isn't that old, even though it seems old, but it is based on a really old recipe for a London Dry, so it's kind of right to period. I'm a big fan of Bombay, not Sapphire, but real Bombay. Nice juniper experience without being crazy overpowered. That's 45 milliliters, or 1.5 ounces. And then finally, we need some lemon juice. And if you recall, a few weeks ago, I had absolutely ginormous lemons. I do again. So rather than a standard juicer, we're gonna use this Reamer measuring cup hybrid here. I think 1 lemon will probably do us for all of our drinks, but I brought a second out just in case. And we're gonna also want half an ounce, or 15 milliliters, of our lemon juice. Just a hair more. Excellent. And with that, we're gonna do something that is not in the recipe and that we haven't really done yet, but for a drink with a substantial amount of egg white in it, I always like to do a dry shake. So that means shaking it before adding ice. And that is something that with a Boston shaker is a little bit tricky, because without the cold of the ice, the shaker doesn't contract. So you don't have the same seal as you do when you're actually shaking over ice. It's fine, just means if you're using a Boston shaker and dry shaking, do actually hold both parts rather than just relying on the suction. So we're gonna give that just a quick dry shake. And then we're gonna go ahead and add in our ice. And give it a proper shake. Then we're just gonna strain that into our, as usual, not chilled coupe that we wish were chilled. And then garnish with some fresh raspberries. I don't think that's gonna hook, so pretend that that's staying there. And here it goes. Bye-bye. All right, and that is the IBA spec Clover Club. Very simple, just gin, raspberry syrup, lemon, and a bit of egg white for this lovely foam. Let's give it a shot. It's very mild. It's not incredibly specific, I guess, is what I would say. Like, I taste the raspberry. The lemon is sort of reinforcing the raspberry, but also doing slightly its own acidic thing. The gin, you get just the heat of the juniper. So you don't get all the botanicals. You don't get a strong juniper flavor. You don't get a strong alcohol flavor. But you do get just a little bit of the almost spicy note that juniper can bring that just cuts through a little bit. Works really well. Texture of the drink is really nice with the egg white. And luckily there's enough going on in the drink, probably the citrus, that the egg white isn't doing that thing that egg white sometimes does where it smells really funky unless you like dash bitters all over it or something. This is perfectly pleasant. Yeah, actually the nose I get the raspberry. Yeah, that's lovely. All right, so now we're gonna move on to what I think will be a more historically accurate drink, probably. There's a little bit of dispute about that as well. So this drink, as I said, people say grenadine, people say raspberry, people say vermouth, no vermouth, lemon, no lemon, etc. So a lot of people, multiple people, have said that the original drink was supposed to have lemon in it, and the fact that it's not mentioned, that's a 1909 source, is a misprint. Maybe that's true, but I'm going from Tom Bullock's 1917, The Ideal Bartender, which is a really important book, and we'll talk about in at least one future episode at a little more length. But Tom Bullock's a really interesting guy. Pre-Prohibition, African-American bartender in Kentucky. He's actually the first African-American bartender to ever write a mixology book. And then the really weird twist on it is he was friends with the Bush's grandfather, so the Herbert Walker in H.W. and W. Bush. And he actually wrote the preface for his cocktail book in 1917. Weird. Anyway, in his version, the Clover Club cocktail, he says it's half a pony of raspberry syrup, half a jigger of dry gin, half a jigger of French vermouth, and the white of an egg. So we are going to do that here. Now, jigger and pony are standard, but not. There were different sizes at the time. I generally go with the idea that a jigger is 1.5 ounces and a pony's 1 ounce. Feel free to argue. That's fine. But let's go ahead and mix it up that way. So I've got this glass that has a little bit of egg white, probably not enough, a little bit too much went into the other drink, but it's gonna be okay, everybody. So we want half a pony of raspberry, so that's 1/2 ounce. And that is the same as the previous drink. We want no lemon this time. We want half a jigger of gin. So that is going to be 3/4 ounce. That's a little more. That's almost 1 ounce. Yeah. Just get rid of that. And then we also want half a jigger of French vermouth. I'm actually using French vermouth. This is Dolan. This is Dolan Dry, not to be confused with Dolan White or Dolan Blanc, which is actually my favorite thing, but that would not be period correct. So 3/4 ounce, half a jigger-ish. And that is it. We're going to do the same method. Again, he does not call for a dry shake. He calls for this all to be shaken over half the glass filled with crushed ice. But we are going to go with the dry shake, wet shake process again for this one. And that did leak just a little bit, both because it was a dry shake and because this just doesn't seal all that well to my shaker tin. But let's get some ice and finish shaking. All right, and I just flipped this back into that shaker tin once I rinsed it. Let's shake it up. And we'll strain that off. Yeah, not enough egg white in that to give it as much creaminess, but a little bit of froth. Apologies there, but the flavor's gonna be fine. And we'll garnish it with some fresh raspberries once more. And this is the 19 early version of the Clover Club. Oh, that's so different. That's so weird. Doesn't really taste of raspberries anymore. The vermouth really comes to the fore. Alright, sorry for that awkward cut. The flavor of this is so much different than expected. I actually just paused it and watched back footage to make sure I put the gin in this drink. And I did. And I guess now that I know it really is there, I can taste it. But this is something just really weird. I like it. It's got all those bitter vermouth notes, but then it's really quite sweet. And apparently, I mean, it's got a decent amount of gin in it, so it's actually a full-on drink, but it just tastes sort of sweet vermouth. There's some fruit flavors. You can get that it's raspberry if you know it, but it doesn't taste of raspberry. Really cool drink, and I think that this is accurate. I don't think this did have lemon juice in it. I mean, it doesn't need it. Let's just put a splash in. Oh, that's so weird. That brings the raspberry back. It doesn't taste lemony. It just tastes more like the previous one. That's wacky. What a wacky drink. Delicious. Love it. I like both of these quite a bit so far. One just side note on the Clover Club is that as it fell into dispopularity, going into the just after Prohibition times and into the 50s, it was considered to be more of a women's drink. And I remember one article I read referenced that it should be served at Tuesday afternoon sewing club or crazy quilting parties. And while I'm not a person who really sews, the idea of every Tuesday getting pissed on a bunch of gin and trying to make a pair of trousers, who's not having fun with that? Who's mad about it? Not me. Alright, so those are both versions we're going to do of that drink itself, but we have a bonus version. We're going to do one other drink in just a moment after I wipe up some of this carnage. Alright, on to the final drink. Now you may have been wondering, since we're making Clover Clubs, why there's been a bottle of Laird's Straight Apple Brandy sitting here. That is because we're going to make a Pink Lady. Now the Pink Lady, according to many folks, is a variant of the Clover Club. I don't think this is true, and people who are very qualified have said that it is. I'm the one who's making a bit of a statement here, but the Pink Lady, as far as I can tell, it's cited all the way back to the early teens as well, and it is always cited with grenadine, not raspberry syrup. So I think more that the opposite happened, and people later modified the Clover Club, making it more similar to a Pink Lady. I do not think that the Clover Club spawned the Pink Lady. It just doesn't make sense to me in terms of evolution why you would add apple brandy and grenadine and then lose the raspberry. It doesn't track for me. So I think this is a totally unrelated drink, but it does have some really similar ingredients and similar proportions. And it's not an official cocktail, I don't think, unless it's in the modern classics or something, and I haven't seen it yet. But it's not, I believe, on the official list, so why not make it today? So for this, we are going to need, I don't know why I'm building this out of order all of a sudden. We are going to need same proportion of gin, so that is 45 milliliters or 1.5 ounces. We're going to need 1/2 ounce of Laird's, the recipe says Applejack, which this is Laird's Straight Apple Brandy. You could also use Laird's Old Apple Brandy, which is essentially, is essentially what their old Applejack was back in the day, was more like this originally. This is the nice bottled and bond stuff. You could use regular Laird's Applejack. We've talked about this in the Calvados episode before. which isn't Applejack. Regular Laird's Applejack is mostly neutral spirits with apple added to it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're gonna use the classic Laird Straight Apple Brandy because that's the best Applejack. We want half an ounce or 15 milliliters of that. We want a conflicting amount of lemon juice. So I have seen half an ounce, I have seen 3/4 of an ounce. I'm gonna start with half an ounce. We can always cheat it back up later if needed. And then again, I believe this drink was always made with grenadine and that raspberry never entered into it. But since we're seeing it as an evolution supposedly of the Clover Club, what will it taste like with the raspberry syrup? Definitely never mixed Applejack and raspberry simple before. So we'll go with half an ounce, 15 mils of that. And then this one again, modern recipes always have it with the egg white, as in the Clover Club, and that's definitely true of recipes from the 40s and 50s as well. Early recipes don't have this drink as an egg white drink from my research. I believe this actually is supposed to be not an egg white drink. So I don't know, but that's how we're gonna try it today. Let me grab some ice, we'll shake it up. All right, got some ice. Let's do it. And I'm gonna strain this one into a Nick and Nora glass. And this one, typically you don't see listed with a garnish, so we're gonna stay without. And this is sort of a version of a Pink Lady, maybe. That's weird. I think it's good. Please hold. So it's not obviously raspberry. There is some kind of fruit, which again, the lemon is less asserting itself as lemon, though I can tell it is, and is more just accentuating that there's a sort of a red fruit thing going on. I get some apple. Yeah, I get a little bit of an apple cider vibe. I get a little bit of a dark, almost barrel-y vibe. This isn't incredibly like a barrel forward aged spirit, but I do get some of that dark, leather sort of really dark spice sort of barrel thing going on. Some apple. The gin's gone. Yeah, the gin's not doing I'm sure it's doing something, but nothing that I would call out as gin. If anything, I think the gin might not be necessary here, or maybe we want something with more diverse flavors. Maybe this would have been a good call for Ford's. Dial back the juniper a little bit and bring in a few other botanicals to maybe find some holes in the apple brandy. I actually really like this. I would like to play with this. And I think I like this more than I like the real one with grenadine, though maybe that will have to be a future episode as well. All right, well, I could keep you here all day as I think about what I will and won't do with the Pink Lady in the future, but that is for a potential future episode. So thank you so much for coming along with me this week as we looked at the Clover Club and its historical version and the Pink Lady. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you did like. And leave me a comment if you have any thoughts about anything we did today. You can follow me on Twitter at shaking_sipping for notes on when we do other things and when new videos are out and whatnot. You'll also see on there tomorrow a link to the blog, which is shakingandsipping.com, where you will be able to see both a write-up of this and each other drink we've covered, as well as tomorrow I will post a review of what happens when I go out to a local quality cocktail bar here in Seattle and order the Clover Club with no other notes. Do they ever make it? Do they know what it is? Do they have all the ingredients? Do they put a twist on it? We'll find out when I post that tomorrow. Thanks so much. Until next week. Cheers.